My name is Matt Zoe. I've been producing for almost 2 decades now, including quite a bit of drum and bass. I talk you through how I would produce a drum and bass track from start to finish. Making drums from scratch, a little bit of sound design, thinking about the arrangement and switching things around, editing things, putting details into the final arrangement and everything in between that. Hey, this is Matt Zoe and you're watching my drum and bass production course with DNB Academy. Hello, and welcome to the stream in which I break down the project for my track Push Me Down the Stairs, which I released as MRSA like 5 years ago now. 4 years ago. No, 3 years ago. Yeah. It was released on Invisible, the now defunct label run by Noisia. And yeah, I'm going to be taking you through the project bit by bit. It's a bit of an old project, so there's some things that I would do differently now, but let's jump into it. So, let's start with the drums and how I triggered everything with, what's this? Okay, so this is the kick. Actually, let's just start with where I got the idea for the track in the first place. So there's a track by Underworld called Push Upstairs, which I've always loved. I think the first time I ever heard it was on TV, the music video on Much Music. And yeah, I was always enthralled with that type of sound. If you haven't heard it, go check it out. It's a great track. Push Upstairs by Underworld. So the whole theme of that is based around that piano riff, which I recreated. So let's start with that, because that's really where this track started. So yeah, the piano riff, I think I made it with Wave Station. It was either Wave Station or one of the Rolling Cloud plugins. But yeah, it was just a standard piano patch that I heavily processed. And then I just did a few different bounces of all the different processing, and I switched it up a bit and layered them together to create this. By the way, this project might sound a little bit different because from the actual release tune, because there's a few plugins missing. But I don't think they were anything too important, so it should be pretty much as it is. Just a few saturation things missing and stuff. But anyway, drums. So yeah, for this I just threw in a kick sample, and I didn't really do much layering to it. Instead, what's this? Okay, so I did a bit of layering within the actual processing. So let's see what I did here. So one layer is this, and then the other layer is this. So yeah, I guess this takes care of the fundamental and gives the transient its foundation. And I wanted it to sound nice and round, so I'm using Corpus here. I haven't done this in a while, but yeah, using Corpus on like the transient fundamental, and then yeah, using various compressors and distortion techniques to squash the harmonics. I guess this is one way of doing it. I would do it probably differently now, but it seems to work. Before the Corpus, I have a weird EQ. This in drums, I usually take a little bit of 300 or to 400 hertz out because it gets a little bit boxy. So yeah, that makes sense. And then for the snare, I do something kind of similar. This is a snare from, I think, a Timbaland sample pack. So it's either Timbaland or Neptune's, one of those two. So here I do something similar, using Corpus to get that foundation. And then, yeah, compressing the hell out of the harmonics. And what's this layer for? And adding more room and width to the sound as well. So just by itself. Yeah, and the hi-hats layered with it is kind of important too. Without the hi-hats, it will sound a bit empty. So the hi-hats in this case are almost like just a layer for the kick and the snare. Yeah. Chopping the clip up within the clip using the modulation stuff instead of just, you know, selecting bits and disabling them. Not sure why I did that. Probably just because I wanted to keep it looped. But I didn't in the end. I ended up chopping it up. Guess we can move on to like the sound design stuff. Yeah, another pass of that piano part with different processing. I probably still have the sound design file somewhere. Yeah, usually when I'm doing sound design outside of a project, I don't know what it's going to be for, but here I definitely knew what I was making this for. I had a clear idea and I knew what I wanted to do. The bass sounds. Again, these are all bits of sound design that I chopped up. And yeah, for this period of my career, I was doing a lot of this kind of stuff. Whoops. Yeah, just squashing the highs with a compressor and pushing it up and leaving everything else alone. Just sort of, it's a way to boost the highs without having too many peaks and ruining your mix with too much like high frequency energy. It's like it keeps the energy consistent. So yeah, it's a pretty simple setup here. Not much layering going on. Just so this. Yeah. Yep, some chopped up sound design. And yeah, not much layering going on. Or processing for that matter. Yeah, using a Pro MB to do a similar thing with the multipass where you squash the highs and bring them up, and a little bit for the other bands as well. I mean, I would do this differently now, but it works. So each element really has its own little place to play. There's nothing clashing or overlapping too much in this first section, which works really well. Everything has its own little moment to shine. And here I start to introduce, what's this? Yeah, I start to introduce little layers to layer on top of everything else. I used a serum patch for this, which I committed to audio already. Yeah, so far everything except for the serum patch has just been imported audio. It's the only thing I actually made inside this project. Yeah, even this was a bit of bass sound design that I created before I started. Yeah, I think I already knew what this track was gonna sound like before I started, so I was just like, okay, I'll do all the sound design first and then make the rest really easy for myself. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. So nowadays I would usually use like volume shaper or track spacer to do side chaining. But here, because it's old school, kind of, I'm triggering these two little hits, and those are being fed into, and also because it's old school, there's no groups within groups, so you should see, yeah, there's some plugins that didn't load, but each group is a separate channel with a compressor on it, and you'll see this is obviously the snare that's it's ducking with, and if we go up, we should find a, there's the bass group. It's down here. Interesting. Okay, so I have all the mids, which is like all the synths and stuff in the mid frequencies, basically, being fed into this channel, which is being ducked by the snare, and then the bass, I guess, is just being ducked by the kick. Yeah, so the bass, which probably has more clashing frequencies with the kick, is being ducked out by the kick, whereas the mids, which probably has more clashing frequencies with the snare, is being ducked out by the snare. Nowadays, I'd probably want to even duck out the mids a little bit with the kick just to make enough room, but it seems like this works for this track because there's so much space in it, because each element has its own space. I didn't need to do that. And then this push vocal, which comes in every now and again. I think I just sampled some speech synthesis online. I don't know. I can't remember which one, but yeah. Yeah, back in the OTT days. Yeah, I hardly ever use OTT anymore. But even here, I'm like only using it on the top 2 bands. I just leave the lower band unprocessed. What have I not gone over yet here? Yeah, so this is my effects channel. And it's pretty sparse, as you can see. Not too many effects going on this track. I wanted everything to be really minimal. So yeah, all of these are the pianos, everything in purple. And they're all just different layers of the same patch, just processed differently. You can kind of hear the processing that I did. So on this one, there's like there's definitely a envelope follower filter on it. Probably like a bandpass filter or or something like that, or a high pass filter that's got an envelope follow on it. Yeah, it starts sounding less and less like a piano. Yeah, another serum pouch. And I remember, I think this was just like a standard saw with some FM from B from the second oscillator. And also there was a comb filter with some modulation movement. So that's what's causing the movement in all this. Yeah. And also, yeah, each one has a different groove on it. So this was all in triplets. And then this section starts going to like 16th, like. Yeah, and that just creates this cool disjointed feeling between these two sections, but I feel like it really works. And yeah, the same in the second drop. So yeah, it was just a copy of the serum patch, but made, I think I just shortened the decay a ton. And yeah, changed up the MIDI pattern. You can hear the clicking when the compressor is docking. That's why I would use volume shaper or something. No. So yeah, super minimal, not many elements going on. Um, and everything is pretty much just imported from a previous sound design session, as I demonstrated in the course that I just did. So yeah, everything has its own little moment to play, which is very different from usually how I make music. I like to cram loads of layers and have lots of lush textures all the time. So this track was kind of like an exercise in less is more. I think it turned out well, but obviously I wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for Underworld. So thank you, Underworld, for making Push Upstairs. And yeah, I'll answer some questions now. So how do you create a structure for your tracks? Well, as I demonstrated in the course, usually I start with some loops and then extend it out. Like here, you can see where I started. This was the looping stage over here. What the fuck is this? Okay, so I completely forgot about this. Yeah, so I started on like a halftime section for this track. I should I should do a VIP and put that back in. But yeah, that's how I structure my tracks. I sort of loop it out first. I don't know where the original loops went. Maybe I didn't loop this one out. Maybe I just started because I already knew the idea. But yeah, usually I start with a loop. Maybe this was the original idea and I was like, fuck it, I'll do a double time chain. That's cool. How did you mix the liquid elements with how do I mix the liquid elements with heavy basses of the track? Yeah. So I've done this on a few tunes like Games, Emotion Sickness, to name a few. Yeah, it's hard to balance like loads of heavy sound design with melodic stuff. So I try to keep all the sound design intentional in a track like that, and try and make it so that each crazy bass sound is only there for the purpose of like enhancing the melodic content, if that makes any sense. So I won't just have some random crazy atonal bass noise like layered with some melodic stuff. I'll make sure that if it is a crazy bass noise, that there's something tonal and interesting in terms of like music content there. So yeah, as long as your heavy basses like have a lot of tonal structure to it, you can layer it with whatever harmonic content you want. And even atonal stuff you can get away with in certain places. Like I'll often like have a mix of two, so I'll have really melodic, harmonic sound design, and then it'll cut to something really atonal. But when it's really atonal, there won't be anything like harmonic over it. So it's just like a sort of call and response. What was the inspiration behind this track? I think I already explained. Yeah, It was Underworld Push Upstairs. What is your best advice for a starting producer? Uh, this question always, I don't know. I don't know because I don't, I'm out of touch, honestly. When I started, there weren't like millions of other bedroom producers. I was the only kid under like 18 doing it, I felt like at the time. So it was a different world. So I don't know what it's like now, except you know, just stay passionate about it. It's like what can, if you're passionate about music production, you're gonna do it. So just do it. Just do music production. That's my advice for any starting producer. Just do it. don't think about do it. Don't think about doing it, or don't like say, oh, I'll learn how to produce one day. Just do it. It's really not rocket science. How does your writing process normally go? Do you start with sound design, build your song off the synth, or do you have a separate writing and sound design sessions? Well, I do have separate writing and sound design sessions. That's pretty apparent. Everything in most of my projects is pretty much from previous sound design sessions. And then 99% of the time I'm doing sound design in the studio if I'm working on anything. You know, nowadays I've been coding a lot, but if I'm working on music, 99% of the time I'll do sound design. And that could include like vocals. I treat that as like a sound design session. And with drum and bass, I usually start with drums when I actually want to, and sometimes I'll just build a kit just to have lying around, so for the time that I do want to make something. But often the case is that when I start making drums, I'll just come up with an idea and won't just have that kit lying around. Any tips to avoid overcomplicating production in general? Yep. Going back to doing sound design in separate sessions. The minute you start to, like, if I just created all of this in this project, the time it would have taken me and the headache just like going through all these different channels to like edit little parameters, and it would just take forever. So I highly recommend getting or just building your own sample library. So when you do go to make a tune, it's super quick, or relatively quick. And then overcomplicating like the mixing process, that's another thing I want to talk about. Most of the time it's not about processing, it's just about levels. You know, and levels in EQ, I'd say. Mid-side EQ is really important. Just think of your mix like a landscape, and anything you want to put in the foreground, you need more contrast, and anything in the background, you need less contrast, and anything in the background shouldn't be like trying to stand out against the foreground. So if your foreground has a lot of mid content, let's say between like 300 and 600 hertz, then everything in the background, maybe there should be like a little dip in that section, or anything that you don't want to stand out. So it's really just like a jigsaw puzzle. So don't think don't think of it like a math problem. It's literally just putting pieces together. Okay. Do you have any go-to philosophies when mixing your tracks? There you go. I just answered the question before I got it. Yeah, basically, the way I think about mixing is the way I think about um, visual art. And I've done a different video about that that you can go look up. I should probably expand on that because it was a long time ago. But yeah, basically, I think that mixing theory and art theory are basically the same thing, just the terminology is a little bit different. And even then, sometimes it's exactly the same. Like, you know, contrast and values and tone. It's all relative. It's all related. So yeah, I look to art theory for inspiration for mixing. How should I approach a drum and bass label to promote my music? Um, I say the best thing to start with is sending your music to DJs to play. I don't think getting music on labels is what happens when your music is good enough for people to play out, I think. And I think the best place to start is getting your music played, whether it's by, you know, by you road testing out yourself if you get little local gigs. But yeah, getting your music in the hands of DJs is gonna help. When you do end up sending it to labels, who knows? Maybe like they might have already heard of you because your music might be in rotation. So yeah, I'd say focus more on getting your music in a playable state that DJs want to play, and then people will want to sign your stuff, and you won't have as much of a uphill battle. What are my go-to plugins? Well, let's look at my menu here. So, Pro Q3 for all EQing, pretty much, except for when I want to do some like analog style, like unless it's like I want to tone shape it or color it in a more saturated way. But for everything else, I use Q3. Soothe, I use a ton just to, yeah, does what it says. It soothes the high end on elements that are too resonant in the high end. And you could do something similar with like Melda spectral dynamics, but I think Soothe is the UI is way more simpler and it's quicker, and that's more important when it comes to mixing. Another plugin you'll see me use a lot is the prismatic compressor, which, yeah, nowadays I use it almost on everything. I don't really use it on like on anything with lots of transient or anything I want to have lots of transient. It's good at squashing transients, and it's really good at being an OTT without being too OTT, is the way I think of it. Again, it's kind of like the spectral dynamics plugin from Melda. I'll just show you that quickly. Melda. Spectral dynamics. This is like a complicated version of those two plugins. But yeah, this basically is like a multiband compressor, except yeah, it's nice and it just sounds good, and it retains a lot of the dynamics, whereas say OTT would just squash something completely. This allows you to control things a little bit more. What else? My go-to plugins. For limiting, probably didn't use it here. Well, yeah, I'll either use Pro L2 or Newfangled Elevate for my limiter. I really like Newfangled Elevate because you can push the drive after the limiter into like a soft clipper, or in this case a hard clipper, so you can sort of add a little bit of attitude. Whereas if you were just pushing into the limiter, there's nowhere to go after that. This can create problems with your mix clipping, and especially if you're like changing bit rates and stuff. But yeah, I either use this or Pro L2. Pro L2 doesn't, you can't really push it after the limiter like this, and but it's way cleaner. And another thing I usually use for like mixing and mastering projects for other clients more is the Townhouse bus compressor. This thing is, it's just a great sounding bus compressor plugin. Yeah, modeled after a version of the SSL bus compressor. I forgot the history behind it, but yeah, it just does what a bus compressor should do, and it does it really well. And that's basically just keeping everything intact in just glues everything together, but retains all the dynamics, and yeah, adds a little bit of color as well. I really love it. What else? Snap Heap and Multipass. Anything by Kilohertz. Faceplant, they're pretty much my go-to. Faceplant is my go-to synth. Serum used to be, and now it's Faceplant. Faceplant, I feel like, is just way more capable of a lot of things. Serum is still more capable at some things, but Faceplant is more capable at more things, in my opinion. I think, yeah, that's it for plugins. What tips do you have for times when you lack motivation / drive as a producer? Sound design. Sound design, where I go to do some other project, like yeah, work on some online event or piece of software. I also build Max patches, which Max for Live is inbuilt sort of programming language that you can make audio plugins with in Ableton, and I love it. And I make a ton of them. So yeah, I just do other stuff basically, and then eventually I have inspiration because I've done other stuff and I get bored of that. What do you like to do with your free time away from music? How different is your lifestyle now from when you were just beginning with music as a passion or hobby? I mean, the only difference between now and when I started is now I don't have a day job. This is just all I do. Yeah, my free time away from music I spend learning other things or drawing, or yeah, especially during the pandemic when I couldn't really do much else. Yeah, just focusing on other projects, and yeah, usually I would go for a drive or hang out with my friends, or, normal stuff. When I start my mixdown, what do you start with first? I don't start with a particular part. I start with whatever's standing out to me that sounds wrong, and I fix that. And then I go to the next part that sounds wrong, and then I fix that. But while I'm doing that, I'll always keep in mind which part I want to be the focal point and which part I want to be in the background. So I pretty much just start with whatever I feel is either detracting from the foreground, or I start working on the foreground to make it stand out more from the background. If I could collaborate with anyone right now, who would I pick? Good question. Who would I mean, there's tons of people that I want to collab with, but if it was just one person or one group, I don't know. I've always been a massive Chemical Brothers fan, so that would be pretty amazing. But I don't think they've ever done a collab. And yeah, a boy can dream, right? Where do you see your music heading over the next couple of years? Let me. And there we go. Where do I see my music heading over the next couple of years? It's hard to say. Lately, I've been, inspired by the music that I started with, or the music that I started listening to, the type of electronic music that got me into electronic music. So, yeah, I feel like my music for the next few years is probably going to sound very like early thousands / late 90s sounding, or at least influenced. Do you think there is a point in posting the music I'm making right now? Will posting it hurt my brand for later when I actually have good music? No. I think posting music, even at in crappy state, is fine. Don't think about your brand. Think about your skill set. Think about your brand maybe a few years into your career after you've developed your skill sets. What was the deciding factor that led you to pursue music full time? There was no deciding factor. It's just what I always pursued. Actually, no, that's not true. At one point, I wanted to be a graphic designer, and I think that changed in like 2004 when I started producing more regularly and realized that I was way better at music production than graphic design. So yeah, that's probably what made the clincher. Is I was pretty good at it, or at least I thought I was. What are some advanced mixing tips to make your drums sound like they are all in the right place? One tip that always comes back is a tip that I saw on like a Noisia Reddit AMA, which is like they try and think about their transients, or at least the fundamentals, as round and uncompressed, and the harmonics compressed. So if you just, for instance, here, like it's like I'm using that thought process by like adding this corpus is basically like it's kind of like a convolution, but it's like playing the sound through an oscillator, basically, or a short delay, which sounds like a membrane. So that adds like roundness to the sound, whereas here I'm squashing it. So you can play around with this theme or idea a lot, and you can get away with a lot of stuff. But generally, like having your transients and your fundamentals clean and round, and keeping your harmonics squashed. Not that doesn't only apply to drums. I think that applies to all sound design. So when it comes to hitting in the right place, it's usually about making sure, especially with drum and bass, that there's not too much sub in your kick and not too much like low like lows in your snare. It's really hard to explain the balance of a drum and bass mixdown, but yeah, there's no one right way to get the drums hitting in the right place, and there is no right place. There's only the wrong place, but there's no right place. What are the major components you focus on when creating this core vibe theme of the song? Well, the emotional content. Basically, you just have to feel it out. Like, if sometimes an idea can start super like uplifting and melodic and then turn really dark. So the vibe sort of creates itself in most of the cases, unless it's something like this where I had a very intentional idea that I wanted to explore. So yeah, usually I'm just sticking things at the wall and seeing what works, and the vibe comes out of that based on the decisions that I base on what I'm hearing. So I'll throw something down and it'll create ideas and it'll create a vibe. But yeah, unless I have an idea already. Who are some of your favorite producers you are inspired by? Well, with drum and bass, definitely Noisia. Logistics is the producer that really made me want to produce music, so I'd give him a lot of credit as well. A few new guys like Caracal Project, Rohan, Gyrofield. There's a lot of really great young new producers out there that are making some amazing stuff. But yeah, Noisia have always been like my go-to for like how the learning learning how the fuck they did what they did. Has been pretty much my entire goal with drum and bass. So yeah. And I think that's it. So yeah. Hope you enjoyed the course and the project breakdown. And yeah, hope to see you all soon. And thanks for watching. See you later. Bye. My name is Matt Zoe. I've been producing for almost 2 decades now, including quite a bit of drum and bass. I talk you through how I would produce a drum and bass track from start to finish. Making drums from scratch, a little bit of sound design, thinking about the arrangement and switching things around, editing things, putting details into the final arrangement, and everything in between that. Hey, this is Matt Zoe, and you're watching my drum and bass production course with DNB Academy.